I am Amy Norris. This is Managing for Failure. Hopefully, after all of that introduction, you are definitely in the right room. First things first, thank you to our sponsors. They help keep everything cheap for you, and that's fantastic because that means you're all here, and I'm so happy to see you all. Secondly, I always like to start with some disclaimers. So, first of all, there may be swear words. We're all adults here. I don't know how important this disclaimer is in Australia, but in the US, they get kind of grumpy if I don't. So, just, if it's not your jam, you can leave. I won't be mad. But if you stay, you're not allowed to be mad at me. That's the rules. Number 2, one size does not fit all. What works in my job maybe won't work in medical tech. Also, I don't know all of the cultural differences between Australia and the US, so if there's anything here that's like, that doesn't make any sense for what we're doing, just ignore that part. That's fine. But even if not everything fits, hopefully some things will. And then lastly, consider the barriers that your teams might have. So more people are going to be averse to perceived rejection for various reasons, whether that's neurodivergence, past experiences, whatever. So just keep your own privileges in mind, and if I say anything exclusionary, please do call me out. So, who am I, and why am I qualified to teach you how to be incompetent for fun and profit? Well, as they explained earlier, I am a developer now, have been since 2017. Before that, I was a graphic designer for a bit. I got a degree in studio art from the University of Missouri, Kansas City, which none of you have heard of. That's fine, most people in the US haven't heard of it either. But I did get a studio art degree on purpose. Don't recommend it. I lied to get my first developer job with National Land Realty. That worked out just fine. If you want that story, you'll have to talk to me later. Won't fit in the talk. And in the intervening years, I have been promoted 4 times and switched jobs once. I'm now the software development supervisor at Dimensional Innovations, where we make all the weird and cool stuff she was talking about earlier. And one of my strongest held beliefs is that in order to be our best, we need to fail. So I try to encourage my direct reports to have a failure mindset. And what that means is that failure is good and necessary. We all know that we learn when we fail, but for some reason, a lot of us still see that as a negative thing. I don't. I think that if learning is good, then failure is good. And we're going to start out with ways that I have personally failed straight out of the gate. So this is the story of my worst workday so far. And I say so far because I know it can always get worse. So this was for that previous job at the real estate company. So most of my job was building agent tools, maps, that kind of things for people trying to sell houses to other people. I am, at this time, the only developer on staff. I inherited the system from the previous only developer on staff. We overlapped for about 2 years working together, and she left, I want to say about 4 months before this event took place. So I've been alone in this job for about 4 months. It is March 13th, 2020. Yeah, so you know where this is going next. So it's Friday the 13th. This is the first day that COVID shutdowns have really hit the US in earnest. I don't know how it was over here, but this was like the big day for us. I am out of town in Chicago on a sort of working vacation because only developer on staff, you don't get real vacations. I'm always on call because I'm the only one to call. And I woke up very sick with something, to a frantic call from somebody at work saying that our agent portal, this thing here, had been hacked. And I'm not panicking yet, partly because of the illness, but partly because the last time somebody claimed that the portal had been hacked, they had just cleared their browser's password thing and thought that their password was gone forever, so wasn't worried yet. I used my own login, and the website had been hacked, so not great. Instead of the agent tools page that I should have gotten after logging in, I got a big skull with some ominous looking words in what I think we determined later was Danish. Not this one, couldn't find the real one, but close enough. So here I am, sick, on vacation, fully panicking that this issue that is not my fault, but fully my problem, will not be within my capacity to solve. Oh, sorry, I tend to wander. And on top of all of that, I'm now worrying if I'm even going to be able to get home on the train in 2 days. But what else can you do? You dive in. So first of all, what do you all think the problem is? No takers? Recovery? Not enough security in the first place? I mean, good guesses, but no, the problem, the actual problem that I need to solve before anything else matters is that agents can't get to their tools. The cause of that problem, the lack of security, the recovery, all of that, that's later. The right now problem is how do I get it so that they can get back to their tools? And luckily, what is the actual problem is something that I have learned over many failures in the past, so that is where I started. How can I get rid of the skull and get the agents back to their tools? And then after that, I can dig into, how did this happen in the first place? What else did they get into? What can we do to keep this from happening again? And most importantly, where in this city that is rapidly shutting down can I get an entire gallon of edible cookie dough because I'm going to need a little treat? So, picture me, panicking, probably ill with COVID, and desperately needing to fix this. I'm on vacation, remember, so all I have is my laptop, not even a mouse, just my laptop, my brain, and probably excessive caffeine intake. I fixed that problem in 48 minutes. And it felt like 48 hours. It took me another 3 hours to track down where the security vulnerability was and patch it real quick so that it wouldn't just immediately happen again. It took me about a week to find the underlying problem and really build a proper fix for it so that it would never happen again. And then months and a job change before I felt comfortable being away from my phone for more than 2 minutes because I was sure that I had missed something and something was going to happen again. So I tell the story for a few reasons. One is just street cred. I want you to know that I have seen some shit, and I know what an emotional and psychological punch in the face a real failure can be. Second, to bring up that I was only able to solve that problem that quickly and in such an amazingly bad series of circumstances because I have had so much practice with failure and problem solving up to this point. And then third, to point out that failure is typically the boss monster of success. So I solved that problem in 48 minutes, and I didn't cause the problem. It was the fault of the previous developer, but I probably should have seen it coming, even so. But even with all of that, I was rewarded. My boss gave me a gift card. I was thanked profusely. It was one of those situations where probably everyone would have clapped at my amazing ability to get things done, except I was in Chicago and I worked remote anyway, so it wouldn't have, but that was the vibe. So this one massive failure was absolutely a turning point in my position at that job, in a positive way. So, what do I mean when I say failure? The most common definition is probably something like this one, a lack of success, and that's not inaccurate. That is what it is, but that's also not really what I mean. I think there's a difference between a useful failure and a simple lack of success. And what makes the difference is whether you learned something. So what I mean is something closer to this, an emotionally upsetting learning experience. Right, because that's really the crux of it. The problem with failure usually isn't actually the failure, it's the way you and the people around you react to the failure. And to be clear, I'm not saying that those reactions are necessarily wrong. A significant failure, words are hard, y'all. A significant failure can deserve a significant emotional response. The biggest trick to managing for failure is learning how to separate that emotional response from an analytical one, and we'll get to that later. But first, I want to get you behind me here. So, why do you want failure? You want more failure because you want less failure. And that sounds counterintuitive, but it's not really. I want you to think about failure on a sliding scale of memes, if it helps. So your website getting hacked while you're on vacation and probably have COVID, that's a 10. That's real bad. Everything is bad. But taking down a small client's production on a Tuesday at midnight when nobody's looking at it, yeah, that's more like a 2. You didn't mean to, that's not good, but it's fine. So I want you all to think back to the first time that you took down production. And if you haven't yet, you will, I promise. It's inevitable. But if you have, remember how terrible that felt, the panic. The first time that I took down production, I took down our biggest client's email server for 2 full days. So this was a multi-million-dollar manufacturing company that now could not send or receive emails about orders, problems, supplies, nothing. 2 whole days. My brain is going, oh my God, someone is going to scream at me, and I'm going to lose my job, and everything is going to be terrible forever. So think back to your original taking down of prod. In that mindset of everything is going to be terrible forever, do you think you were doing your best work? Do you think that you fixed that problem as quickly as you would have if it had been just a regular bug fix? Of course not. Adrenaline is a hell of a drug. That same email problem today, I could probably fix in an hour or less. But inexperience, a lack of support, and panic made everything worse for everybody. But if you think back to the next time you took down production, and yes, again, if you've never done it, it will be a recurring experience, not as bad the second time, right? I didn't get fired the first time. I only got screamed at a little bit. Everything was bad for 2 days, but not forever. Hopefully yours was even better and you didn't get screamed at all. Your brain remembers that, and then the second time is a little bit easier, and so you fix everything a little bit faster. But what if you could have gone into that first failure with the relative calm of the second, or even better, the 5th, or the 10th, or the 20th? That's what you want failure for. Your brain learns from small failures and big ones, and you can practice being calmer under pressure in low-stakes situations so that then you'll be actually calmer under pressure during high-stakes situations. And then there's also just simply learning more practical solutions. The slide makes sense in a minute, I promise. Most people don't know how to change a tire until they get a flat. But once you've learned it, it's way easier the second time. But there's no reason you need to wait until you get a flat to learn how to change a tire. You could do that today. And the same is true for taking down email servers, databases, what have you. If you practice first, you'll know what to check later. And then there's also the hidden risks of having perfect teams. We don't want teams that never fail, because we want a team that is constantly learning and growing and getting better. And that cannot happen without failure. We need our teams to learn and grow, and we need them to feel comfortable doing that so that it's something they want to do rather than something they feel like they have to do. Failing on purpose can be fun, and you can learn things from failures that you made happen intentionally. This is not a great slide for you all, but stick with me here. People generally don't like to fail, right? It's hard, it's uncomfortable. People see you not being your best, and that's kind of unpleasant. But we gotta. And that's where we're gonna start, getting you, as a manager, more comfortable with failure. So this is the bit I kind of introduced at the beginning of separating your emotional response from your analytical one. We're getting to that part. You have to put your own mask on before assisting others. If you're already comfortable failing, great, you can go check your Slack messages or something and come back in a minute. If not, we will get you there. But it's gonna be hard. That's the reason for my definition of an emotionally upsetting learning experience. Failing kinda sucks, especially when you're not used to it, which is why you need to practice. And it might sound kinda crazy that I'm telling you should practice being bad at stuff, but why though? Failing, and more to the point, failing gracefully, is absolutely a skill that you can practice and improve on. There's a reason that one of the first things that circus performers are taught is how to fall. It's not because they've never fallen before, it's because they're going to fall, and they need to know how to do it safely. So really, I want you to practice failing. So choose a new hobby, a skill, something you've always wanted to learn how to do, whether that's a language, a musical instrument, learn to knit, I don't care. But whatever it is, just get really comfortable at absolutely sucking ass at it. If you get good at it and you still like it, great, I love that for you. Find something else that you can suck at once you're good at the first thing. The point is to always be being bad at something. And this is going to help you get better with that emotional response because your brain is going to learn that just because you're failing doesn't mean the world is ending. And one way you can practice with that is by using a technique I like to call worst best probably, because I don't have a better name for it. So first, I want you to consider the worst case scenario for whatever it is that you're about to attempt, and really go balls to the wall with this. So if you fail, are you going to burn the building down? Is anyone going to die? Are you personally going to be negatively affected? And if yes, how? And get really specific. And then write that down or keep it in your head and move on to the next one. What is the balls to the wall best case scenario, right? Will you get promoted? Will you get a fat bonus? Will you get invited to speak at a technical conference in Australia when you're from Kansas? You never know. And then finally, what's most likely? And 90% of the time, this is going to be nothing happens. You do the thing, and then you did the thing. Good job. And that's all fine. The point of this is to get your lizard brain on board with what's going on, which is that those worst case scenarios that you're really good at thinking of are really about as ridiculous as the best case ones. So neither of those is going to happen. And the more you practice actively thinking about that, the more your lizard brain gets on board. And once you've got the lizard on board, we can move on to your higher functions. And that means closely examining your failures and figuring out why they happened and what you can learn from them. So this is another example from my more recent past. This is a project that we did for the Kansas Cosmosphere, which is like a space museum. And it looks like this. It is 2 buttons and a hand crank on that little podium thing, and 2 of the biggest screens you have ever seen. This is not doing them justice, I promise. Each of those screens is about the size of this one here. And 2 actual rockets on either side with lights. The way this works is you pick one of the buttons, which lights up either rocket, changes some of the graphics, and then you start spinning the crank. You spin that crank until your rocket takes off, it plays a little video, it wiggles the floor, and that's it, that's the whole game. That might sound like a lot if you're not used to working with analog controls and floor wigglers and such, but it kind of is, but also it's really not that much. I mean, I didn't care about rotational speed, direction, just did you hit the button? Is the crank spinny? That's it. And this is mostly done with one of these. That's a rotary encoder. This is the one that I use to test with on my desk. And on my desk, it worked great. When I set it up on site, it worked perfectly. It was fine. I was there in Kansas doing the thing, like 3 hours from home. It worked great when I left. And then a couple of days later, we were getting so much noise on this rotary encoder that it was functionally useless. It thought it was being spun all the time. So what the heck? Well, it turns out the rotary encoder that we installed on site was not the same as this one that was on my desk. And on top of that, it had not been installed correctly. That's a very simple explanation that it took us about a month to figure out. So on the surface, this isn't my fault. I didn't pick the hardware, I didn't install the hardware, I just did the software, and when I tested it, it worked. But looking deeper into the cause of this failure, there is definitely more that I could have done to prevent it, starting with not assuming that we were using the same hardware on site as I was testing with, and once it became clear that we weren't, not assuming that, well, it's a rotary encoder, they all work the same way. They kind of do, but they also kind of don't. So, this was a really unpleasant experience, and I promise the duck will make sense in a minute. But taking the time once it was fixed to really dive into what that problem was and what was in my ability to do better, what questions I could have asked, what things I could have tried that might have led us to a solution sooner, means that next time I'll be able to fail faster and more efficiently. And what that means is asking yourself really hard questions. So, or even better, asking somebody else the really hard questions. Getting them to ask you the hard questions is what I mean. So, do you all have rubber ducking in Australia? Okay, good. I was a little worried that wasn't universal. All right, so once you know the entire cause of the problem, from the beginning all the way to the end of what the solution is, get someone who was not involved in that at all and rubber duck the whole thing at them with the instructions to ask you any questions that they think of as you're doing it. because they might think of things that, had you asked them during the whole calamity, might have been really insightful. And then you'll know them for next time. So, to recap, step 1, get really comfortable with failure. Step 2, dig deep in what you can learn from it. Now that you're good to go, we can move on to your teams. So I do want to be clear that this is a long-haul project. All right, you're not going to be good at this tomorrow. I'm not good at it now, and I've been working on it for years. But you don't have to be a perfect example in order to get started. And being an imperfect example can actually be a great place to start, because you want to be an example for your team. So that means not hiding your own failures. Here's a whole bunch of mine. You don't have to read them all. But when I get stuck on something that I think my direct reports might have an answer to, I like to post it in our developer Slack channel for everyone to see publicly, so that they know I don't have all the answers either. And I do this for 2 reasons. First, I am lazy as hell, and this is usually the easiest way to get an answer. They spot my typos, they tell me things that they've already fixed that are very similar to the things that I've fixed. It's great. Other people doing my work for me. Love that. And then secondly, I'm modeling the behavior that I want to see. Every developer on my team knows that they can go to the developer Slack channel, post their problems, and have everybody else on the team willing and able to help them fix it. And they won't be looked down on or anything like that, because I'm doing it first. And my boss does it too. And you're going to want your direct reports to be okay with this, because the next thing we're going to do is get them out of their comfort zone. Your comfort zone is a comfy place to be. That's why we call it that. But you're not going to learn much in there. And most people won't leave on their own. They're going to need a gentle nudge or sometimes a solid kick in the ass. And what this means is you need to be assigning projects to people that you're not sure can actually finish them on their own, or that you're definitely sure can't finish them on their own. But absolutely crucially, you have to have those support structures in place first. Throwing somebody into the deep end when they don't know where to ask questions, or even that they're allowed to ask questions, that's not great. They're going to shut down, they're going to give up, and that's the opposite of what we want. So if you're starting from 0, I want you to start small. So not a whole project in a brand new language that they never used before and that nobody else on the team is an expert in either, but maybe just a new CSS framework that you want them to learn on top of a JavaScript framework that they already know, or whatever makes sense for your stack. All right. I assume that you do fire drills here. That one I'm assuming is universal. But think back to the very first fire drill you ever remember doing as a kid. I'm guessing the first one you can remember, you already knew what to do. But somewhere, back before your beginning memories, somebody taught you how fire drills work. And we can do fire drills the same way for common issues at work. So if you have a development environment that you can break on purpose, perfect. If you don't, schedule some time that you can break the real one on purpose. But hopefully you have something you can test in. Schedule time for this, at least twice as long as you think it's actually going to take. And just like with real fire drills, we're going to want to step it up slowly. So your first one shouldn't be a surprise. It shouldn't be anything too crazy. Just guiding your team through whatever your disaster recovery is, step by step. So finding the problems, checking that your hypotheses are correct. Hypotheses? Attempting the fixes, all of that, step by step. And then step it up from there. So sometimes they should be a surprise. Not to you, obviously. You're the one causing the problems, but to your team. But still do the scheduled ones occasionally, just to make sure everybody's still on the same page, especially when you get new people on your team. Throw in harder challenges, throw in twists, all of that. But remember that you are the cause of these problems, so you shouldn't be trying to help solve them. Your role in the fire drill is to keep everyone on task and, encourage them when things start to go kind of pear-shaped. And those will be your jobs in a real crisis situation too, so this is also good practice for you. And it can words are hard, y'all. It can help you learn what not to do. So first of all, I want to start with a non-tech example. Everyone in this room was at one point a teenager. And since we're all nerds, I'm going to guess that we were probably the kind of teenager that liked to hide in the bedroom or maybe not at home at all and not really interact with your parents all that much. So did anyone ever have the experience of coming down, having the wild hair of, I'm going to go hang out with my parents, and then having your dad give you the side eye and be like, well, look who decided to show their face. That's not cool, right? Even if that didn't happen to you, you can picture the vibe I'm going for. Why would I want to do that again if I'm only going to be chastised for not having done it sooner? So that's the first what not to do. Do not punish behaviors that you want to see. And in fact, if you can reward those behaviors, even better. And this doesn't have to be anything crazy, like nobody's getting a gift card every time they do their timesheet, but a thank you in a Slack message can go a lot further than you think. And public praise will do a lot more than public shame all the time. If you are rewarding people in Slack, in person, where other people can see it, they're going to want those rewards. If you're only punishing people when they make mistakes, that's not constructive. All right, it is important when the shit hits the fan that you maintain your cool. All the correct words in the world mean nothing if your team can see you visibly panicking while prod is down. Which isn't to say you shouldn't be panicking. Your feelings are your feelings, nothing you can do about that. But as smarter people than me have said, you can't control your feelings, you can control your actions. So if you need to panic, go panic in the bathroom, have your little breakdown, and then come back out and be as cool as you can be. Hopefully, your fire drills will have prepared you for this a little bit, and you'll know what your team likes to do. Are they all better each focusing on one piece of the puzzle? Is it better if you commandeer a meeting room, bring everybody together? These are things that you should know in advance, so you're not trying to figure them out when the shit's already mid-fan. And that's the last don't. We need to be pushing our teams out of their comfort zone, but we need to be doing it slowly. So if you're shoving them into the horrors when it's actually crisis time, that's not great. So yes, we need to push people out of their comfort zones, but we need to be doing it incrementally, and that's going to vary from person to person. So you need to get to know your teams and figure out what that means for each person individually. All right, so you're on board. You have a plan. You're going to get your team failing more purposefully. You have things like fire drills, but those interrupt your scheduled work, right? So your bosses may or may not be okay with that. And if you go to your boss and you say, I want my team to fail more, you're probably going to get some looks. So, assuming you have someone you answer to, if you don't, you can ignore me for a bit, but assuming that you do, you now have two choices. Choice the first, pitch it to your higher-ups and convince them that this is a good idea. Choice the second, ask forgiveness, not permission. If we're going with option one, we're going to want to pitch the benefits of failure. So I have business cards. You can give them to your bosses. My rates are very reasonable. No, I'm kidding. It's really just this. You will have less downtime because your productivity is going to go up. Your team cohesiveness will go up because they're going to learn what their own strengths and weaknesses are amongst themselves before they need to know what that needs to be. Customer satisfaction will be higher because you're getting problems solved faster. So you probably know already what all of your team's strengths and weaknesses are. Hopefully. If you don't, you should learn. But it can save so much time in the moment if your teams know who among their peers to go and talk to. So who are your subject matter experts for whatever it is that we're talking about? Who's the best at tracking down the causes of problems? Is that always the same person, or does it depend on what part of your project you're talking about? Those are all things that you should know, but doing your fire drills and talking to your team will help them learn who to go talk to without having to go to you first. Option two, do whatever you want until somebody yells at you about it. This is my mantra for life. Ideally, the interruptions will be minimal enough that no one's even going to notice until you have some results to show for it. At which point, you will have solid arguments for why you should be allowed to keep doing it. I can't tell you which of these two options is the best. That's really going to depend on your relationship with your bosses and whether they would prefer to be slightly lied to by omission, or to be asked to waste a little bit of time. That's up to you and your relationships. All right, if your team is really skittish about failure, we may need to start even smaller. So, just like I suggested that you all start practicing failing with hobbies, there's ways we can start with fun failures for our teams. Something I did before I was even a supervisor was to introduce board game hour at DI. This was for selfish reasons because I like to play board games. But it turns out this has some really similar benefits to the fire drills, especially if you play games like these. These are all co-op games, so it's everyone against the game, not against each other. But you can learn a lot about your team by having them play games like that. So who's focused on the game, who's focused on just socializing, who gets emotional when the game starts to go sideways, who's taking charge, those kind of things. One important caveat with this, though, if you decide to do this, do not frame this as any kind of a test, all right? This isn't training, this isn't any of that. Just frame it as fun, or if you have to, team building. People will act differently if they think that you're trying to get them to do something. It's just for fun. Another easy thing to do is internal projects. So this is especially great if these are things that only your team is going to see, like internal documentation, which you probably should be doing anyway, or internal projects, whether that's things that you need to build or not. You can create your own internal hackathon. The point of this isn't to actually do the thing. The point is to just give your team a way to fail in a way that they can see is going to be low stakes. They're not going to get fired if they screw it up. It's all fine. And this sounds crazy on the surface, right? Kind of like the falling from before. Circus performers are taught how to fall, not because they've never fallen before, but because they need to learn how to do so safely. The same thing is here. Just because you've failed before doesn't mean you really know what you're doing. So, assume that your team doesn't know how to fail, and then give them some tools to be better at it. Here are some of my favorite concrete strategies. First of all, 30-15 fail. I use this all the time. You set a amount of time or a number of failures that you're willing to tolerate before you're going to go ask for help. So, mine is 30-15. If I am stuck on a problem for 30 minutes, so no progress, no new rabbit holes, nothing, I need to stop doing that for at least 15 minutes and go do something else. That can be working on a different project, that can be stopping for lunch. If it's close to the end of the day, it can be tomorrow. It can be more than 15 minutes, just at least 15 minutes. If you come back after the 15 minutes and you still don't have any idea what to do next, you have failed, and now it's time to ask for help. This is a great tool to give to people who maybe aren't so great at following directions, because if you give them something like this, where it's a very set of steps, it's going to work way better than saying, well, make sure you ask for help if you get stuck. What does that mean? And it works extra well with making failure the goal. So I call that 30-15 fail for a reason. My goal when I'm using that tool is to get to the failure point. I want to get so much done that I get to a point where I don't know what to do next. So failure is the goal. Task failed successfully. The second type of failure goal is choosing a number of failures to be your success point. So when I first started to get into public speaking, I made my goal to get rejected from 30 conferences in a year. Right? The goal was not to get accepted anyway. The goal was to get 30 rejections. Now, I made that goal in January of 2020, so it didn't work. But the strategy is sound. I reintroduced it in 2022. I'd have lowered it from 30 to 10, because for some reason there were way less conferences in 2020. Who knows? But that year it worked. I actually got accepted to the very first one I applied to, but then I got rejected from a whole bunch more. And the reason this works is that it pushes me harder than if I wasn't trying to get rejected. I would not have applied to this conference if I hadn't been trying to get rejected by at least 10 conferences this year. I mean, I had no expectation that they would accept me here. This is a hell of a trip. But the point is, if you set the goal as failure, when you do get those failures, they're not disappointing. You were expecting it. That was the point. The next solid strategy is to over-communicate. And I mean this for everything, but I'm going to break it down because it's one of those things that sounds really obvious, but then you don't do it because you don't know where to start. So the primary places I'm going to be talking about are positive feedback, negative feedback, expectations, changes to plans, and questions. We're going to hit those in order, starting with the easiest one, which is positive feedback. This is a great way to encourage the behavior you want to see. We talked about that earlier, but this is how we step that up. So if you're not already telling people when they're doing well, I'd obviously start doing that. But the way to step it up is by being very explicit with what you're praising. So I saw you take ownership of your mistake earlier, and I really appreciate your commitment to accountability. Or I know it can be hard to ask for help. I really appreciate you asking that question in the Slack channel where the answer can help everyone else also. The point of this is to point out exactly what it is that you're praising, a specific action that that person has taken, and why it's a good thing. This is probably the hardest one. Nobody likes giving negative feedback, at least I hope you don't, because that'd be weird. Nobody likes getting negative feedback. But it can be really easy to destroy all of the progress that you've made with a mistimed criticism. The best thing to remember here is that every failure is a learning experience. Offer help if you can, and that can be something like, I noticed that you have trouble asking for help. Here is a tool that I use for myself, and that can be the 30-15 fail. Or, I've noticed that you tend to deflect when things go wrong with your projects. What can I do to make you feel safer here? I believe most people don't want to be bad at their jobs. There's usually an underlying reason why something's going wrong. And just communicating that can really help to build that confidence with your team. Remember, if you only ever give feedback when people are doing things wrong, though, that's not good. Once they correct the behavior, make sure you're doing the positive feedback as well. It's so much easier to give positive feedback, and it's so much more effective. All right, expectations. This is going to be one of those ones where I don't know how much the American culture is bleeding in. But the most important thing is to over-communicate what your expectations are for difficult times. So if shit has hit the fan, are you expecting your employees to work 16-hour days? Are you expected to stay at the office until the thing is fixed? On the other side of that, are you not at all expected to do that, and you should feel fine just, leaving the fire burning and coming back in the morning? None of those are necessarily a problem, as long as it's not all the time. But it can be way less of a problem if you set that expectation up front. Nobody likes crunch time, but it's way worse if it just comes out of nowhere. I recently hired a new batch of new hires because we were going to have a whole bunch of work coming up that was going to be a lot. And I set the expectation with my team that we were not doing crunch time about it. The reason that all the work was coming in an avalanche was not the fault of anyone on my team. It was way back, and we're not doing it. 40-hour weeks, do your workday, go home, we'll pick it back up in the morning. And I set that expectation because I didn't want anybody else to come in and say, no, this has to get done by tomorrow, and have them expect to follow that. And of course, things can change. If I told everyone, we're not doing crunch time for this ever, for real, I promise, and then, okay, actually there's an exception, we do need to do it just this one time, communicate that. And communicate why. Don't assume that people know what you want them to be doing in stressful situations if you haven't told them. And people learning to fail are going to be particularly sensitive to change. So explaining the reasoning can be really helpful with that. So rather than just saying, I'm adding somebody else onto your project, explaining out the reasoning of, I know you can do this by yourself, but I think it'll be way less stressful for our project manager if we add somebody else onto your team, plus this will give them some practice working on this new thing that you're working on, and give you some practice working on your leadership skills. So much better for everyone involved. And then lastly, questions. I'm going to kind of zoom through this one because I just got a 5-minute warning, but we're going to use an example. Did you get my email? That's a terrible question. It's yes or no. But that could, depending on how your day is going, spark immense dread. So, I sent you a deck to review. Better, but is this my deck? Have I done something egregious? I don't know. This is so much better. I'm not going to read the whole thing. But this is so much clearer. I know that I'm not getting fired over email. I know exactly what the expectation is for what I'm doing, what's expected of me, what the timeline is, all the things. That's only, what, like 3 times as many words? Just be clear about stuff. Don't do that, all right? Nobody has ever walked into a meeting room with their boss who has just said, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" and expected to have a good conversation. I have a good relationship with my boss. I like to think I have a good relationship with my direct reports. I have also been fully fired. Please don't do this. But yeah, so I'm working on capacity for next month, and I know you've been working on with our other coworker. Can I ask you how they've been doing? That's so much better. You're definitely not getting fired if you know what you're going into the meeting room about. All right, last concrete tip for here. Be overly positive about failure. I really like to say "good job me" when I do something that fucks up in a useful way. Good job you for other people, whatever. The thing about this is your brain cannot tell the difference between positive reinforcement from other people and positive reinforcement from you as long as you say it out loud. So do the thing. Self-deprecation works the same in the opposite direction. If I trip over the floor and I say, "Oh man, I'm just so clumsy," my brain hears that. On the other hand, if I trip over the thing on the floor and I say, "Man, it's a good thing I'm so pretty," like, so much better. Oh, hang on. Better, all right. So, you understand the value of failure now. You have some strategies you can take back to your teams. I want to stress that you shouldn't try to do all of this at once. You shouldn't try to do anything for your team until you've got your own head right. So if you need to, take one of the action items I said for you, get a new hobby, or 3, start applying best, worst, probably. One of the things, if you're already comfortable with failure, or once you get there, take something back to your team. So start running fire drills, start a board game day or a hackathon. Start rewarding the useful failures that you're seeing. Whether you decide to warn your higher-ups or not, I really hope that you start enjoying your failures and reaping the benefits of them. Anybody? Oh.
We have time for probably 2 questions. Aha.
I'm an SRE, I love incidents. I'm going to talk to you later about some stuff, but I wanted to ask you, other than the rocket and shaky floor thing, what's another memorable failure from your past you'd like to share?
I mean, you got my 3 biggest ones, the rocket thing, the email server, and the hackening. We did a project for Legoland where I was using a brand new development tool. It's called Touch Designer, which is a weird one, and I broke literally everything on that project multiple times. And sometimes it was really fun. Like, what I was trying to do was take a live video, grab the playback, slow it down so we got kind of like a Dukes of Hazzard slow motion replay of a Lego car doing a little jump. At one point, I managed to split out the RGB components of the video so that all the cars had a little like rainbow trail on them, which was not at all what I was attempting to do, but it was kind of neat. Anybody else? Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you for the talk. I was just wondering, do you have any any example of when you introduced failure to your team as an exercise? Were there any unexpected ways the team members reacted?
It's a difficult question because I try not to go into these kind of things with any expectations because you really never know what people's reactions are going to be. So because I'm not trying to expect anything, there can't really be any unexpected results. A lot more people were resistant to the game time than I was expecting, Like, they really just want to keep working, which is a little bit baffling to me. Like, if my boss comes to me and says, hey, you want to go play games for an hour? Yes. But apparently that's not the case for everyone.